Welcome to Box Art Versus, a series where I take a gaming platform or series and compare a handful of the box art from Japan, US and Europe to see how they compare and which region has the best ones. In this episode we're taking a look at one of Nintendo's biggest and longest running series, The Legend of Zelda. Where better to start than the very first entry in the series? Immediately we can see a stark difference between the US and European version compared to the Japanese counterpart. The Japanese version features Link heavily on the cover with the world you explore in the background. However, Western markets were treated to a much less interesting, dull gold background and a fairly realistic depiction of a shield that doesn't tell you anything about the game at all. Understandably, both box arts look pretty dated by today's standards, but I think it's fair to say the Japanese version is far more reflective of the game. What about one of, if not the most well-known game in the series, Ocarina of Time? The US version has the logo with a gold backdrop, a common trend for US versions of Zelda box arts. However, the European version decided to change things up with a jet black background and the logo in solid gold, which in my opinion looks pretty good and is an improvement. The Japanese version, however, trumps them both easily with a fiery monochrome aesthetic as Link rides Epona. You could say the monochrome design is a little dull, but I think it looks great. Ocarina of Time's direct sequel also has some interesting differences. The US version ditches the muddy gold backdrop in favour of something a little more colourful, but it's the European cover that does something a little more interesting. It also features the logo but has a green backdrop, and if you look closely, has a black outline of Clocktown in the background. Neither of these come close to the Japanese version though. Even today it looks pretty modern, with Link riding Epona and a really fantastic outline of the various characters and species you can change into. It looks incredible and captures the game's dark tone perfectly. The 3DS remake of Majora's Mask has the same artwork for all regions, but for the sake of comparison, I think they knocked the artwork out of the park. The Wind Waker is my favourite Zelda game of all time, but the Western box art sure leave a lot to be desired. Nintendo went for a brown gold backdrop on the Western covers, and while they do have Link sailing on the King of Red Lions, it's quite faint, and for such an artistic, colourful game, muddy brown doesn't really do it justice, nor is it a colour that you would relate to it. The Japanese box art is everything the Western version should have been. Blue is boldly used across the entirety of the art, which fits perfectly with the sea setting, and the rainbow lion art in the background looks great. The Minish Cap is an interesting example. There are 3 variants for this one, yet the differences between the US and European versions are puzzling as they both feature the identical background, but Link has a slightly different pose for seemingly no reason. What is apparent though is that the Western version showcase the action side of the game, while the Japanese version highlights the Picori and shrinking element that the Western versions just completely ignore. In comparison to the Japanese version, the European and US versions just seem a little basic. When it comes to Twilight Princess, I think the Western version is actually vastly superior to the Japanese one. The Western box art has this really great artistic paintbrush style that shows both the head of Link and Wolf Link to show the divide between the normal and Twilight realms, and it genuinely looks really fantastic. The Japanese version does have a diagonal split to show the difference between the realms, but instead we just get an action pose of Link that is both less artistic and completely disregards the wolf element, which is such a big part of it. So for once, the European and US versions are significantly better. Now we have a scenario where the European and Japanese versions are the same, but the US one is different. The European and Japanese versions place the focus on the sea and adventure element, which is nice and colourful, while the US one showcases a ghost ship with a really cool treasure map effect. I think both of these had their own merits actually, but the European and Japanese versions definitely give a greater sense of adventure. As with Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks has the same cover for the European and Japanese versions, but differs in the US. Once again, the European and Japanese version really capture the bright, colourful adventure element of the game, with both Link and Zelda riding the train, while the US focuses on the action, with Link ready for combat and Zelda possessing a knight. The US one certainly isn't bad, but just like with Phantom Hourglass, the other box art just captures a sense of adventure more effectively. I think examples like this really highlight how marketing in the US is more inclined to lean towards showing action. The trend of Europe using Japanese covers continued with Ocarina of Time 3D. The US version opted to go for a gold box art that uses the same image of Link riding Epona as on the original N64 Japanese version, which is a nice touch. Unlike some of the previous Zelda box arts with gold backgrounds, this one is a much nicer gold compared to the more muddy brown ones, but I still don't think it outweighs the European and Japanese version, which has Link and Epona galloping across Hyrule Field. That said, it was possible to get the US gold box art in Europe as a pre-order bonus, or if you purchased the limited edition Zelda 3DS. When it comes to Wind Waker HD, once again the US version has gold box art compared to the European and Japanese version, although the identical artwork is used across all 3 regions, which is notably better than the GameCube covers. Link's pose matches that of the original Japanese cover, but the collection of all the notable characters with Ganon looking menacing in the background looks fantastic. I think it might just be my favourite Zelda box art in the series. In the case of Twilight Princess HD, they moved away from any gold box arts. The European and Japanese versions are a really nice callback to the original Western release with the addition of added characters. The US version has those additional characters but has some new updated artwork in the middle. Both look great in my opinion, but I think the European and Japanese version is just a smidge better. And finally we have Breath of the Wild, which interestingly is where the European version was the outlier for a change. The Japanese and US versions have a really stoic cover of Link with his sword ready, staring off into the distance at Hyrule Castle, which does a really great job of making you feel that you're about to head off on an epic journey. The European counterpart does capture the colour palette of the game much better, there's no denying that, but Link looking backwards doesn't work quite as well. As a neat touch, the US and Japanese version also seems to harken back to a piece of artwork from the original game. So there you have it, a comparison of Zelda box art over the years across various regions. I think it's fair to say that Japan had the much stronger box art overall, and the US relied too heavily on action-focused artwork and gold backgrounds at times. But be sure to let me know what you think in the comments, you may well have a different opinion. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for a notification each time I upload new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you in the next video.